Hair's like paper compared to the hide of almost every animal around you. You can't outrun a lion, can't outclimb a leopard, can't outmuscle a bear. By every physical measure that matters in the wild, you are one of the easiest meals in your entire environment. And somehow your ancestors didn't just survive in a world full of things designed to eat them. They found ways to walk through that world with confidence, not with strength, with tricks. Genuinely bizarre, clever, borderline insane tricks that turned defenseless humans into something predators learned to avoid. These are the ones that actually worked. Start with disguise because it's older than almost anything else. For more than 150,000 years, humans covered themselves in animal skin, oils, and animal scents, not for warmth, but to disappear. A hunter draped in a whole wolf hide or a lion pelt didn't look like a human anymore. He didn't smell like one either. To a predator downwind, the human silhouette, that tall, upright, unmistakable shape that every dangerous animal learns to associate with threat, simply vanished. In its place was the shape and scent of another animal. This let humans move through territory that should have been lethal, slipping past the exact predators that would have targeted a recognizable person on sight. Wearing the skin of a wolf, you became invisible to the things hunting for humans. And there was a second layer to wearing a predator's skin. If you were draped in a lion pelt, other animals didn't just fail to recognize you as prey, they read you as a predator. A creature that smelled like a lion, moved low, and carried the scent of a known killer was not something a hyena or a smaller cat wanted to test. Ancient humans essentially stole the reputation of the most feared animals around them and wore it on their backs. Then there's the trick that sounds too simple to be real: mud. Ancient humans coated themselves in thick layers of mud and let it dry hard on the skin. This did two things at once. First, it sealed away human scent. A predator that hunts by smell suddenly couldn't detect the person standing right in front of it because the mud locked the scent underneath a shell of dried earth. Second, that hardened crust acted as a crude armor. A claw or a tooth that would have opened human skin instantly now had to get through a dried layer first, and the difference between a deep wound and a shallow scrape was often the difference between dying in the wild and walking away. Mud was free. It was everywhere, and it turned a soft human body into something slightly harder to kill and much harder to find. Now the one that genuinely changed the balance of power: poison. For a long time, the assumption was that poison weapons were a relatively recent invention. Then, in 2025, researchers published findings on 5 quartz arrowheads recovered from the Umlatuzana rock shelter in South Africa. The arrowheads were 60,000 years old, and they were coated in plant toxins, specifically poison derived from a plant called giftbole, sometimes known as the poisonous onion, which contains compounds that disrupt the heart. This is the oldest direct evidence of poison weapons anywhere on Earth, and it pushes the timeline of poison use back tens of thousands of years. Think about what poison actually does to the predator problem. A human with a spear has to land a fatal blow, hit something vital on a moving, dangerous animal at close range. A human with a poisoned tip only has to break the skin. One scratch. A single shallow cut that would mean nothing on its own now delivers a toxin that shuts the animal down over the following minutes or hours. Poison meant a small, weak human no longer had to win a fight outright. They only had to make contact once and then wait. It turned the entire encounter from a test of strength into a test of patience, and patience was something humans had in abundance. Then there's fire, but not the way you're thinking. Not warmth. Weapons. At night, groups lit enormous rings of fire around their camps. A wall of flame encircling the sleeping group created a boundary that almost no predator would cross. The light, the heat, the smell of smoke, the unpredictable movement of the flames. Every instinct in a large predator screams to stay away from that. The fire ring meant that the most vulnerable moment in a human's day, the hours spent unconscious and defenseless in the dark, became one of the safest, because nothing wanted to step through the fire to reach them. And when a predator did come close, humans discovered they could pick fire up and carry it straight at the animal. A person swinging a burning branch became something no cave lion, no bear, no pack of hyenas wanted to engage. Fire was the one weapon in the entire natural world that animals had no defense against and no instinct to fight. Every other threat a predator could bite, claw, or overpower. Fire, it could only flee from. A single human running forward with a flaming brand could drive off animals many times their size and strength purely because the fire overrode every instinct the animal had. Now one of the cleverest tricks of all, and it exploits something specific about how predators think. Almost every ambush predator on Earth, big cats especially, attacks from behind, and almost none of them will attack prey that is looking directly at them. They rely on not being seen until the final moment. Take away that surprise, and most of them abandon the attack entirely. Humans figured out how to weaponize that instinct with nothing but a painted face. We know this trick works because it's still used today. In the Sundarbans mangrove forests, where tigers kill people every year, forest workers began wearing masks with a human face painted on the back of their heads. To a tiger stalking from behind, the person appeared to be staring straight at it, and the attacks dropped dramatically. The same principle has been tested on cattle in Africa, where researchers painted eye patterns on the animals' rear ends. Over a 4-year study, not a single cow with eyes painted on it was killed by a lion, while unmarked cattle were. A pair of painted eyes, facing the direction you can't see, tells a predator it's been spotted, and a predator that thinks it's been spotted usually gives up. This is why eye spots appear over and over across the natural world, on butterfly wings, on fish, even on the backs of a tiger's own ears. Ancient humans lived surrounded by animals that used this trick, and the ones who learned to fake a watching face gave every stalking predator a reason to look for an easier target. Now the trick that required an entire group working together, and it's one of the most impressive things ancient humans ever did. Pit traps. Near Tultepec, just north of Mexico City, archaeologists uncovered 2 enormous pits dug roughly 15,000 years ago. Each one was about 5.5 feet deep and 82 feet across. Inside them were more than 800 bones, the remains of at least 14 mammoths. These weren't natural formation. Humans dug them by hand, deliberately, and then concealed. Groups of 20 to 30 people would separate a single mammoth from its herd and, using torches and branches, drive the panicked animal toward the hidden pit. The mammoth, 8 tons of it, standing over 11 feet tall, would crash through the concealed covering and fall in, trapped, where it could be killed with far less danger to the hunters. The genius here isn't just the trap, it's that humans figured out how to make an animal's own size and weight work against it. A mammoth was too big to fight directly, so they built a hole that turned the mammoth's mass into the very thing that doomed it. The same principle worked on saber-toothed cats and other heavy predators. You don't beat something stronger than you by matching its strength. You make the ground itself do the work. And finally, the simplest trick of all, which relied on nothing but human voices and human coordination. Noise. Large groups of humans would band together, bang wooden objects, and shout in unison, creating sudden walls of overwhelming sound. To a predator, this was deeply unnatural and deeply alarming. Most predators rely on picking off isolated, quiet, vulnerable targets. A wall of noise from a coordinated group signaled the exact opposite. A large, alert, unified force that knew the predator was there. The sudden shock of dozens of humans erupting into sound at once was often enough to make a stalking animal abandon the hunt entirely and retreat. It cost nothing. It required no weapons. It only required that everyone make noise at the same moment. So look at what ancient humans actually did with their supposed helplessness. They wore the skins of wolves to vanish their bodies. They tipped their weapons with poison so a single scratch could bring down a giant. They surrounded themselves with rings of fire and charged predators with burning branches. They faked watching eyes to break an ambush before it started. They dug traps that turned an animal's own weight into a death sentence. And they used nothing but their voices, together, to frighten off things that could have killed any one of them alone. None of these tricks required strength. Not one of them required speed, or claws, or fangs. Every single one required something else entirely. The ability to observe, to plan, to use the environment, and to work together. That was the real weapon. Not the spear, not the fire, not the poison. The mind that thought of them, and the group that carried them out. The predators were born with everything they needed to kill. Humans were born with almost nothing, so they made everything else, and that turned out to be the deadliest